In the beginning, the people would say he's arrogant, but I don't think so.
At first, people would call him arrogant, but I don't agree. Before he became the philosophical poet of American folk rock, Paul Simon was known for being a tough critic of rock music, a careful artist who is very focused on writing songs and has a strong dislike for what he sees as average music. It's somewhat Hawaiian, but it's nice. Paul not only dislikes bad music but also feels personally offended by it, according to his longtime collaborator Roy Haley, who revealed this in 2015. While most musicians are careful about criticizing their peers, Paul would closely examine why something didn't work musically and then completely reject it. Today we're listing the 6 musical acts that supposedly pushed the thoughtful songwriter over the edge. The bands that made Simon stop being careful with his words and speak out strongly in ways that industry experts still talk about years later. Through harsh private criticisms, subtle lyrical insults, backstage arguments, and musical parodies, these relationships show a side of Simon that fans don't often see. Some entries may surprise you, while others support what Simon fans have believed for a long time. Get ready for the final ranking of the bands that challenged the skilled songwriter, the ones he criticized, analyzed, and especially reportedly wanted to stop weakening the music scene he worked hard to maintain. 6. Grand Funk Railroad. When Grand Funk Railroad became popular in the early 1970s, Simon apparently thought they represented everything flawed about American rock. He saw them as musicians with limited skills, believing that their loudness made up for what he claimed was their lack of creativity. They're promoting the idea of rebellion without any real action, Simon reportedly said to Rolling Stone in 1973, although this quote was supposedly removed before the article was published. It's 3 chords, loud music and little thought. This is the opposite of what music should achieve. What many people don't realize is that Simon's dislike was more than just having a different taste. We would have disagreements, and these disagreements could turn into real arguments that would need to stop. Studio engineers who worked with both bands say that Paul would often leave recording sessions if Grand Funk was mentioned. He once reportedly said, "I'd rather discuss plumbing techniques, at least pipes serve a purpose." Simon's dislike reportedly grew stronger after both acts played at the same festival in 1971. Witnesses say he watched their performance looking unhappy. Afterward he supposedly told his band that wasn't music, that was organized noise with a marketing plan. The criticism came from both sides. Don Brewer, the drummer of Grand Funk, reportedly said to Circus magazine that Simon was too smart for rock and roll, encouraging Simon to supposedly reply during a university class, "I didn't know that thinking and music couldn't go together. Maybe that is why they produce what they do." Producer Phil Ramone said that Simon would play Grand Funk records during recording sessions to show what to avoid in sound. He claimed their albums were like master classes in how not to mix drums. Years later, when Grand Funk's popularity had decreased, Simon supposedly had a rare moment of kindness when he told a radio interviewer that they connected with their audience, which is what truly matters. "I simply wasn't the right audience for them." However, people close to him say that he still switched the station whenever their songs played. 5. The Doors. Jim Morrison's spiritual attitude and poetic goals seemed fake and showy to Simon, which bothered him as a songwriter who valued good writing. Paul believed that Morrison was a skilled singer who was covered by less impressive poetry, Art Garfunkel supposedly shared in his 2017 memoir. He'd say, "Jim believes that being unclear means being deep. Y paso mi carrera demostrando lo contrario." Music historians seldom talk about the famous backstage meeting at the Monterey Pop Festival. Witnesses say that Morrison went to talk to Simon about songwriting techniques, but he was reportedly turned away with a sharp response. "I create songs, not statements. Lol. Maybe I should concentrate on the music first, instead of the stories." The hostility supposedly grew when critics started comparing Morrison's lyrics to Simon's work. In a tense interview with The Village Voice in 1968, Simon reportedly reacted to the comparison by saying, "I construct songs with the precision of architecture." Morrison tosses words at a wall and calls anything that stays, poetry. Simon's private messages with producer John Simon reportedly included harsh criticisms of the musicianship of the Doors. Take away Morrison's showiness, and what is left? Paul apparently wrote about cocktail jazz with occasional flashes of creativity. The emperor not only isn't wearing any clothes, but he also believes that being naked is very meaningful. Creedence, Clearwater Revival. One of the most surprising names on Simon's list of musical rivals was Creedence Clearwater Revival, a band known for its simple style and genuine sound, which might appear to match Simon's musical beliefs. Paul considered them to be cultural tourists, according to longtime engineer Roy Haley. He said, the rivalry reportedly got stronger in the late 1960s, when both acts were having major commercial success. Columbia Records executives say that Simon would get annoyed when people compared how much CCR produced to his slower approach. He reportedly once said, quality over quantity. Anyone can write 3 mediocre albums in a year. What bothered Simon the most, according to people who know him well, was John Fogerty's voice. Paul believed it was fake, a show, as photographer Richard Avedon allegedly remembered from a photo shoot. He would say that he's singing as a character, not as himself. SOS Actuation, no musica. They met at a radio station in 1970, creating what one DJ called noticeable tension. When Fogerty tried to talk about how Simon influenced his work, Paul reportedly replied with a short interesting, since your music suggests you've never listened to mine. The most telling response was Simon's reaction to CCR's breakup. At a dinner party, witnesses reported that when Fogerty's legal issues with his former bandmates came up, Simon supposedly said, the tragedy isn't that they broke up, the tragedy is that they were successful enough to think they shouldn't have. If you're liking this detailed look at rock's hidden rivalries, now is a great time to click that subscribe button. We reveal the most surprising fights in the music industry, and the stories that popular documentaries leave out. It seems like you might have forgotten to include the text you want me to paraphrase. Please provide the text, and I'll help simplify it for you. Few fans of the Grateful Dead know that underneath Simon's calm personality was a strong dislike for the band's spontaneous style. This difference in taste supposedly turned into a personal grudge. Paul thought that the 3-minute song was the best type of art. Producer Phil Ramone reportedly said that the Dead confuse length with depth. Anyone can play for half an hour. The talent is in knowing when to quit. Simon's dislike was said to go beyond their music to include the whole counterculture they stood for. People who toured with him said that he saw the Dead style as musical self-indulgence disguised as freedom. He once reportedly told his band, they've convinced their audience that discipline is the enemy of creativity. It's the complete opposite. The hostility reportedly grew stronger when both groups played at Woodstock. Simon, who was with Art Garfunkel, was seen watching part of the Dead's performance looking frustrated. Photographer Henry Diltz stated that Simon allegedly whispered, "This isn't a performance, it's a practice session that they are charging people to see." What really bothered Simon was the Dead's relaxed attitude toward creating songs. He couldn't understand their lack of concern for perfect structure. Art Garfunkel reportedly said to biographers, Paul would take weeks on a bridge between lines. He strongly opposed the idea of making up lyrics or structures on the spot. In a notable story, Simon supposedly went to a Dead concert in the mid-1970s without revealing his identity, and left halfway through. Years later, when Rolling Stone asked him about the experience, he reportedly said, "Some religious experiences require more patience than I possess. I like my insights to be brief. It seems like you provided just the number 2. Please provide the text you want to be simplified so I can help you with that." Simon's dislike for the Eagles was well known and went beyond just criticizing their music. Their whole approach to being genuine apparently upset the detail-oriented songwriter. Close associates said that Paul saw them as fake outlaws, whose carefully crafted image went against the values of the country rock music they played. In 2010, producer Jimmy Avian supposedly said that Paul believed they were acting like cowboys while living in luxury. He'd say they're singing about a simple life that they've purposely stayed away from. "At least I recognize that I'm a nervous New Yorker." The tension is said to have started after the big success of Hotel California. Witnesses say Simon was shocked by what he saw as the song's pretentiousness, reportedly telling his drummer, "They've mistaken obscurity for depth. You shouldn't need summaries to understand a rock song." What fans don't know is that Simon reportedly turned down several invites to social events where Eagles members would be there, and he once supposedly told his manager, "I've spent my career writing honest music, I don't need to chat casually with professional people." In a telling moment, Simon is said to have watched an Eagles concert for a friend, remaining quiet for several songs before supposedly commenting, "They've studied every ingredient of rock music except its soul, technically perfect, emotionally vacant." The hostility wasn't only from one side. In a 1977 interview, Glenn Frey reportedly called Simon's solo work pretentious. This led Simon to supposedly reply, "I'd rather be precious than hollow. Uno necesita cuidado, el otro solo necesita un consultor de imagen. It seems like your message is incomplete. Could you please provide the text you would like me to simplify?" Kiss held the #1 position on Simon's list of musical complaints, a dislike so strong that it supposedly brought together the divided music community in laughter. People who know Simon say he saw Kiss as the end of real music. Paul thought that Kiss symbolized all the problems with American entertainment, as his longtime friend Lorne Michaels reportedly said in a rare interview in 2013. He referred to them as the triumph of marketing over music and saw their success as an attack on his skills. Most fans don't know that Simon's dislike started when he saw them on TV in 1975. Witnesses say he stood in shocked silence before supposedly saying, "This isn't just bad music. This marks the end of music as a way to communicate. It's music as a product." The criticism covered every part of Kiss's performance. During recording sessions, Simon would supposedly use them as a warning example, once telling his band, "Remember, no matter how difficult this gets, at least we're not shooting fire from our instruments to distract from what we're playing." They met at an awards show in 1979, which one person called the perfect cultural contrast. When Gene Simmons tried to introduce himself, Simon supposedly responded, "I know who you are. The question is what you look like without all that makeup." The most interesting part was Simon's response to Kiss being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Witnesses say he opposed their inclusion, reportedly arguing, "If we honor spectacle over songcraft, we should just call it the Entertainment Hall of Fame and be done with it." What really fueled Simon's dislike was not only Kiss's music, but also what he saw as their intentional disregard for music's deeper meaning. Producer Phil Ramone allegedly said that Paul thought songs should shine a light on the human condition. He would say, "Kiss no estás simplemente ignorando esa tradición. They're making fun of it with every firework." So here are the 6 bands that Paul Simon hates the most. From stadium rock bands to jam groups, these artists managed to break through the careful control of the poetic songwriter. Which of Simon's music battles surprised you the most? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.